And all right, guys, let's get a voice check. We are live here at Max's Models, a couple of minutes early. We'll get the ball rolling here. And real quick, guys, the comments. You can just, if you can hear Steve, you give a voice check.
3, 2, 1, go.
And let's see if you guys can hear us. Hey, Ricky. Ken won't be with us tonight. It's me and Steve because Ken's still out of town visiting family. And make sure, check. Okay, I'm showing I got metering here. And I'll just turn up this a little bit. And
3, 2, 1, go.
yeah, okay, I can hear you. So looks like we're good on the volume. All right, guys. Welcome to another episode of Max's Models live stream. And I got some stuff for us to talk about today. And once we get through those things, which maybe, I don't know, take whatever it takes, we'll jump on into whatever you guys want to talk about. And something that I don't even remember where the suggestion came from, something somebody said, I think. But the subject I thought I'd cover tonight is cars in television and movies, but regular, off the factory floor cars, not necessarily like that. In other words, we're not going to be talking about the specialty cars tonight, like the Batmobile, the Monkeys Mobile, the Munster Coach, all that stuff, any of the Barris stuff. And I mean, we've talked about those cars before, and we can talk about them again at another time. But I thought what would be actually more should talk about is just regular cars that have been used in the television movies. And I actually did a fair bit of research on this. I've actually spent the last 2 days getting ready for this live stream because the more I started putting stuff together, the more questions I wound up with. And learned some and even watched a couple of movies. By the way, guys, before I get going too far, oops, cancel that, sorry. There is one thing, if you saw the advertisement, the reminder for tonight's live stream, it's weird. I mean, this is, I don't know if it's the styrene river or the celluloid river working together, but last night, for whatever reason, I watched, was the Phantom from Space, and I'm going through, I think, I don't know, it was legacy.com or whatever, and turns out that the female lead from that movie that I had literally just seen 10 or 12 hours before, Noreen Nash, just passed away the other day. 99 years of age. One of the mavens of sci-fi. So this episode will be dedicated to her, and of course to Barry Newman from the movie Vanishing Point, who passed away just a few days ago. And we'll be talking about the Vanishing Point models also today. So I thought I would give that quick nod out there. So get into the cars. The first thing, just to have something to talk about, I have a little bit of structure to this. We'll start off with some of the just direct tie-in cars. Now, yeah, some of these are modified cars to be sure, but they're not like the Dukes of Hazzard car is still a Charger, even though it's, kind of turned into a racing car. But, and as I started digging into this, I was really amazed at some of the kit model cars that were available and some that were not available. And most of the stuff I have up here are pretty much stock cars. And some of them, of course, most of them are just reboxings. I'm pretty sure that about half the cars we're looking at were already in production, and they decided to, hey, look, this TV show, they're using one of those, so let's get the rights to do it. And one movie I watched today, if you look in the center, you see one called Bearcats. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever seen that show or remember it. I watched the pilot called Powder Keg today. Now, it's interesting. There are actually 3 or 4 cars. Barris apparently built 2 of them. One with an automatic transmission for the actors, and he built a third one that went on the circuit, but which was never used on camera. But as I understand it, this photograph on the box art, which was one of the promotional photos from the television show, that was actually a real Stutz Bearcat. And, of course, they didn't drive that. They just posed for pictures with it. I guess they know all the car aficionados will be watching it close. The two of them they made, one of them did most of the driving. I think all the cars still exist somewhere, but it only lasted it was supposed to go 27 episodes. It only lasted half a season. Believe it or not, it got knocked out by the Flip Wilson show and Alias Smith and Jones, so it only went half a season. Surprisingly good show. Way better than it had any right to be. Like I say, I watched the Backdoor pilot 90-minute episode Powder Keg today, and this was not a cheap production. In fact, the only technical error, if you want to call it that, I saw was that the Banditos had pearly white teeth. But the weapons, the cars, everything, it was well written, well acted. Most of the movie is introducing the characters and setting up for the big 20 minutes at the end when they're shooting it out with the bad guys. But it's 1914. It's just before World War One. It's the American West, and they're taking on Banditos with what looked to be a couple of British Vickers guns. I was like, a lot of the one-liners that were in there and stuff showed that the people who wrote it understood their history, and a lot of little references that I'm sure would be lost on a lot of younger modern audiences, like the major talking about how he lost his leg, and the captain's telling him ever since Luzon. I was like, oh, that means they served together in the Philippines. And I guess when this was made in 1971, they just expected people to know that. Now, I do believe this was a recasting of a existing kit by MPC. I don't think they made it just for the show, just the decals and remarketing. This was, what do they call it? Oh, gosh, I was looking it up. The classics line they had. Steve, MP, they had a...
Yeah, they made a bunch of, cars from the turn of, the teens into the 20s. And that was one of them. They were molded in color.
Yeah. And oh gosh, I looked it up now and I'm having a senior moment. It was the something classic line or something like that. But this, and of course, car tie-ins already, the show was heavily promoted. It was well financed. It may have been part of what did it in, even though it had a strong following. It got knocked off by a variety show and another really good show, Alias Smith and Jones, which is a really good Western. But it's too bad because that had a lot of potential. And one scene, which is, I think it's on the upper left there, where it says Bearcats with the pictures of the actors. It's Dennis Cole on the right, and
Rod Taylor.
Thank you, Rod Taylor. Another senior moment. But that photo of the top left of the car, it's actually, they put some runners on it, and it's running on railroad tracks. And he's bragging of how it's 80 miles worth to go. They can be there in an hour.
Okay.
But, I imagine a Stutz on rails could do 80. I looked at the parts of the kit, though. It looks like a really tricky build. Because you've got, you look at the suspension system and everything. And the model car is of the model of the real Stutz Bearcat. It is not a model of the studio prop car. In fact, if you look on the left panel, or even the lower one, if you can't, a little hard to see, it doesn't have the correct suspension system or anything. It's just made to look like it from a distance. And although a Stutz Bearcat with a pair of 30 cal machine guns, I mean, come on, what's not to love?
Those kits from that series were not good sellers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Chris, you are absolutely right. It was Rod Taylor and Dennis Cole. What's her name? Paluzzi. Is it Luciana Paluzzi from the Green Slime?
Yeah.
She's one of the two. She's the main woman, and there's three female characters that have major parts, and she's one of them. And I recognize, and I saw her name, and of course it also had Fernando Lamas and what's his name, Michael Ansara. I'm like, oh man, all the good good character actors we all love, and I saw her name, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's from the Green Slime, and I looked it up, and like, yep, that's her, and looking as lovely as ever.
Fiona Volpe from Thunderbird.
Viola Volpe, that's right. And I think she's the one that Bond swings around with her when he sees the gun or something. And
yes, sir.
Sets her in the chair. Oh, she's just dead. But I remember that scene as a kid. I was like, wow, that was like one of the first Bond movies I ever saw. I was like, or with Connery, I was like, wow, these guys are hardcore. You never know who's going to get in a Bond movie. You're like, sure you do. You always know whoever helps Bond is going to die. But anyway, the Bearcats was an interesting premise for a TV show. These two guys are a couple of basically troubleshooters, but they're extremely well paid. I guess you could call them mercenaries, but they get into their backstory. But they run around the American Southwest stomping out problems, and it's right before and at the early part of World War One. So some of their stuff involves German spies and everything else. But even though it's the Old West, they drive a car, they're carrying .45 automatics, they got belt-fed machine guns. So if you've ever seen the the movie The Professionals, it's kind of in that vein. And they
have to be well paid to be driving a Stutz Bearcat around.
That's true. And
1915.
Yeah, because that would have been that car still would have cost thousands of dollars back then.
Yep, that was a big money car.
So,
and that was kind of like the Corvette of its day.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was in fact, one of the opening scenes when they meet the first girl who works for the guy that's hiring them, she sees it and recognizes it for what it is, and she's like, breathless because she's never seen a Stutz Bearcat in person, and she's talking about the performance, a little exposition right there, letting her do it, and of course the guys are very impressed with her, knowledge of cars. In a time when, at the same time, the blacksmith was talking how it's a devil machine that's going to put him out of business. I was like, you're pretty much right. But if you get this kit, I do warn you, though, I think you're going to find yourself with a handful of finicky parts just because of the way the suspension and everything's all exposed. And so beware. But gotta admit, if I had that kit, I would have trouble bringing myself. I'd probably build it, but I would have trouble bringing myself to tear the cello off the box that was on it, because I remember seeing those in the store, and I wanted one where that was one of the few cars that I really wanted back then, but it was like $2 or $3, and I was like, nah, got to get my $1 monogram 148 scale fighter plane.
Ricky just said it's Route 66, well before highways were built.
Well said. Route 66 with machine guns. The other thing I was looking at when I was putting these slides together, at first I didn't have a lot of rhyme or reason to it. And again, doing research, because that's what you do, I came across this Elvis Presley movie, Live a Little, Love a Little. And I think that was one of those movies that Elvis wasn't real happy with. Because I know he was getting tired of doing these ridiculous movies. But the Little Myers Manx dune buggy, I remember somebody in our hometown had, I don't know if he had a Myers, but he had a dune buggy. And it looked just like it. It might have been a Myers. And I was thinking, it's funny. They did this dune buggy, and I assume it was an existing mold, but it may not have been. Maybe it was just a tie-in to the movie. I think it already existed. But the other ones on the right and at the bottom, you remember the Persuaders with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis.
Yep.
And their cars were a part of it, the Dino and the Aston Martin. And yet no one ever and I know the show only lasted like a season, but still, no one ever bothered to. I mean, that's just like free marketing, especially back then when the show was made. The kits existed, and now the Aston Martin there is only in 1/43 scale, I think. But still, that would have been like the studio would have probably taken a few grand just to use the image, and it might have helped pump a few models out. I remember being thoroughly intrigued with that show only because of the cars, and I wasn't even a big car guy. And the same for like the 36 Ford Coupe Thunder Road. I looked at all the cars that were used in Thunder Road, and I was amazed at how few of them actually have models made, even though they're fairly common cars. Like they use the 57 Ford 150, but every 57 Chevy 150, but every 57 Chevy model you find is a Bel Air. And I know it's just a trim package, but and I'm thinking AMT made the Ford Coupe. You would have thought maybe at some point somebody might have got an idea, hey, let's do a retro thing and throw in, because the model came out 30 years after the movie, 20 years after the movie. They probably could have it just seems like a promotional opportunity that just no one put together. I'm not saying that you're going to...
Probably because nobody would remember the movie.
I don't know. I mean, the Aurora Frankenstein and Creature features were all from kids who had watched, stuff in reruns, I mean... There's,
Yeah, but I think that's a horse of a different color.
I'm sure you're right, but I don't know. It just seems like it would cost them next
You know,
to nothing.
I think monster movies resonated much more in popularity with kids than a movie about bootleggers.
Yeah, that's fair. You're right. I am sure you're right on that one. But I just saw
Now,
that and like,
the Persuaders, the reason there was probably no kids was because it was actually a British production.
Mm-hmm. Well, you thought they'd have done it in the UK. These kits were available in the UK.
Huh?
Well, these kits were available in the UK. You'd think they'd have done it there.
Yeah, but very few things that there occurred over there, they actually made stuff. I mean, the Thunderbirds were
Well, they were phenomenal.
That was the oddity. I mean, they did make a lot of Thunderbirds kits, but they had a lot of shows that they didn't make a lot of stuff up over there.
And Ferrari
I can only think of the Saint.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't make a model kit; they made a die-cast car.
It's funny you should mention that because I have that in here somewhere. I just what is it?
I mean, there was a model made of a P1800, but I don't think they tied the license to it.
Right. Garfield points out that Ferrari enthusiasts would say that the Ferrari Dino is a Dino, not a Ferrari.
Right.
Okay.
It's not thought of as one of the better Ferraris.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, Ferrari wanted his son died. He wanted a car he could name after him.
I gotcha.
That was where this car came from.
Well, getting into missed opportunities, in 83 or 84, I went and saw a movie that I love called Red Dawn. And I realized that that the short bed Chevy stepside, the correct year and everything, the model is available. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm kind of surprised NPC didn't sell, the Patrick Swayze on the side of the box with, Red Dawn, because that movie was very popular, especially with young guys. It's the kind of people who would buy models. I think that might have been a missed crossover opportunity there. And if somebody wants to do a diorama or something, from the movie, there's plenty of reference photos, and that the truck would require other than a paint job and really nothing much it would require, of course, if you remember the first 20 minutes of that movie is almost a sales brochure for the Chevy pickups, and bouncing along and hauling butt and dodging riskies and everything. And and speaking of trucks, you guys might remember the trucker craze, and my younger brother was one of the young people that was just caught up in the trucker craze. He could tell a Diamond Rio, a Kenworth, Peterbilt, all of them. He could spot them at a distance. And while I was doing research for this, I stumbled onto, I think it was a Canadian TV show called Cannonball. And this goes back to the 50s. And
Paul Birch and what was his name?
I am impressed, Steve.
William Campbell.
Very good. You have impressed me. I didn't think anybody would get this one. But
I used to watch this when I was a kid. I loved this show.
I was thinking this was moving on before there was moving on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it had pretty good plots to the story.
And it's such a wild looking truck, that cab over engine. I forget what the GMC. Yeah, and I could not find any kits. Certainly not from the show, but I couldn't find any kits of this truck at all. And older tractor trailers are not particularly well represented. No shock. But I didn't have time to look up an episode. I'm sure I could find an episode of this on YouTube or something. But I just like the idea, and I imagine they got the idea from Cannonball Express, World War II or something, But well, that was really known as the Red Ball. But anyway, I for those who don't know, I actually did drive tractor trailers very briefly, just a few weeks, and they hired a bunch of us that had chauffeurs licenses, and we were getting on the job training. But they told us when they hired us that they hired 5 of us, so we're only keeping 2 of you. So it was a Shark Tank kind of thing. A couple of other guys had experience. Didn't have any trouble driving the truck, but without proper training, backing it up was the nightmare. And it wasn't the job for me, but I'm really glad I did it. And I drove both conventionals and cab overs. And the nice thing about cab overs, of course, they have a shorter footprint, so they can turn tighter. But I think the conventionals ride a little better. But anyway, that would be a cool thing. I think it should be a cool truck to make a model of. But the problem is, I don't know if you'd sell very many of them. But there were some trucker tie-ins, and I imagine a lot of you guys remember BJ and the Bear. And my brother loved that show, and it was pretty good. I liked it too. I think they used Jackson Browne's "Doctor My Eyes" for their intro song, I think. And
no, they had their own song.
They had their own song. For some reason, I guess they used it for background music one time, but my brother kept humming that song for a while because he'd heard it on the show, I think. But,
we sold a ton of those kits at AM2 when it came out.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing them, and as always, I probably should have got one, but should probably, the Aerodyne, Kenworth Aerodyne cab over. But the BJ and the Bear, I remember, I don't know what was more popular, the truck or the monkey, but nobody even remembers the actor's name.
No.
Right. You can remember the name of the two guys from Cannonball, but not from BJ and the Bear.
No, because they didn't have a monkey.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody knows the name of the monkey in Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack. No, we named the monkey Jack. And, of course, the classic that everybody knows with Claude Akins, Moving On.
Moving On.
Which was the one that
That had the best intro song of any show.
Oh, yeah. I think I used it a while back, in fact, when we were talking about trucks or something. Sonny Pruitt. And Frank Converse is his partner.
Yep.
And, but that truck still exists, and you can still find the models around. I don't even think they're that rare. But that was another show that had, pretty decent plots for what it was. Like, how do these two long-haul truck drivers keep getting caught up in everybody's drama? But
Armando got it. It was Greg Evigan who played BJ.
That's right. I did look his name up. I just didn't write it down. The Greg Evigan. That scheme was a nightmare to mask off. Yeah, I'll bet it is, with all that thin trim and everything. And as old as the decals are, you'd probably have to mask it or make new decals. But I don't remember. I remember building one semi. I don't think it was the Moving On truck. It was the same. It was a Kenworth, I believe, but I don't think it was Sonny Pruitt's. But that was another, one where they had the good sense to do a tie-in. The show was pretty popular. And there are some tie-ins that they did that really, again, they could use existing molds. The car was focal enough that people recognized it, even though it was, Moving On, the truck was a main part of the plot, right? It's centered around their life driving the truck. But then you go to something like Get Smart, everybody remembers his little, Sunbeam Tiger?
Sunbeam Tiger.
And everybody remembers that, because it's at the beginning of every episode, but you don't really see it that much. But somehow it still managed to kind of become an iconic little car, and somebody had the good sense to, make some minor change. I don't know if they cut a new mold for this or not. They may have, but...
if you look at all the truck kits and the truck shows, they were basically just Route 66 with trucks.
Yes.
Route 66 paved the way for those shows.
Yeah, for the on-the-road show. And, now, when you get over to the movies, though, there are a lot of stock cars that became the center of a movie, even though the car may have had magical powers, like, I don't know, say Herbie the Love Bug. But basically, it's just a Volkswagen, And God, how many people painted their cars up like this when that show was out? And God, how many of these things did they destroy making that movie? But
okay, they were Volkswagens.
Who cares? They were Volkswagens. That's what they were made for. But the funny thing is, like Herbie the Love Bug was just a kid's comedy. I remember seeing it as a kid. I loved it. I watched all of them, even the Lindsay Lohan one, just for nostalgia's sake. I saw part of it, but like on YouTube. But I remember Herbie Rides Again, Herbie in Love or whatever it was. But then, and I thought, the idea of magically possessed cars was funny. Then I saw Christine. Thank you, John Carpenter, for crushing my view of the possessed car as a fun thing to have. But, what was that, a 58 Plymouth, I believe, was Christine, right?
Yes, it was.
And and
there was great consternation about how many cars that were 58 Plymouths that they destroyed making that show, because there's not that many of them around.
Yeah. I think the original Christine, well, I guess you call it the hero car, I think it's still around.
Yes. What they did was they made fiberglass and rubber cars for the ones where they folded up or they came back. Mm-hmm. It was a real interesting trick of craftsmanship.
Yeah. Now, I've never built this kit, and I'm thinking this, if you're going to light a model car, this is the one you want to have working lights on. And I like the box art where they put, the light behind the blue light behind the grill. You give mood lighting, Because I never thought a 58 Plymouth would ever be something that I would consider creepy. And I was like, yeah, leave it to John Carpenter. But I don't know how well the kit goes together, but
it's not a big problem.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Kit.
Good. Yo, you've got one of those, don't you?
Yeah, I'm sending you a picture or something that you can then put up. I'm emailing it to you right now.
All right, I'm checking my email.
Hold on. Okay, I just sent it.
If Dario's out there, no, I was saying I did wait a while back. Okay, let's see here. YouTube. I'm just checking my emails real quick. We're doing the interesting video. Oh, okay. Got a few emails. I'm waiting for it to populate here. I'll come back to it. So, let's see. What else? Is it Christine related, or should I go on to the next picture?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Okay.
Christine
well, then I shall wait. The thing is if the grill on it's like a lot of AMT and MPC grills, if you want to light it, of course, you're going to have to grind out the area because these just stamp them as one piece. Some of them are actual see-through grills, but a lot of them aren't. And let's see here. Okay, inbox. Hadn't showed up yet.
Oh.
Well, I'll come back to it in a bit. We'll look back around. For some reason, you've already sent it, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, it's flying around somewhere in cyberspace, locked up on a server.
It's still uploading. That's why, because I guess it's a big picture.
No worries. Well, we'll come back to it. But now I didn't include stuff like the car because that was a highly modified vehicle. We're dealing with, tonight's kind of dedicated to cars that are just regular off the showroom floor cars. Like our good friend Barry Newman, who this episode's also dedicated to, who also just passed away, in Vanishing Point. Now I know you've got a couple of these, right?
Yeah, I do.
That's the Challenger RT, and
yep.
I got to give them credit. The modern Challenger really does look a lot like it. I mean, different dimensions, but
yeah, they did a real good job of sort of updating it.
Yeah,
because you know what it is when you look at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and that was literally he was taking the car from like a dealership, supposed to be delivering it, right?
It was a car transporting place he was taking it from.
Mm-hmm. So it was a brand new car.
Yeah, it was. It had to be transported from Denver to San Francisco, and somebody sort of egged him on and bet him he couldn't do it in a certain amount of time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Dario is online. Dario, what I was saying in the email was that I did wait a while back. He just sent me a picture of Wade, the funny character. Anyway, no worries, all good. Now you see, if Hank Azaria and those guys had been driving a Charger or Challenger, our Challenger RT, instead of like a freaking 81, Caprice in the Godzilla movie, Godzilla 98, they wouldn't have probably wound up in his mouth. But I'm thinking that I could only find one kit of I think it was 87 Caprice, whatever. I mean, this is the only kit that's the correct model, and it's a police car. And if someone wanted to, that would make a pretty interesting little diorama, though, But that's one time that, a regular stock off-the-shelf car had a big part in what was supposed to be a big movie.
You got it. It shows it's sent.
Okay, let me run back and log in again here. Mail. Da-da. Da-da. Ah, there it is. Oh, Barry sent one also. Oh! I think Barry sent me some pictures of the car. Hold on, let me... Ah, there it is. Okay. Give me... is this yours?
What?
The picture you sent?
Which picture are you looking at?
With it up against the wall and the picture and everything?
Yeah. That's in my basement.
Where did you get that front end?
Excuse me?
Where did you get that front end? That's sticking out as
It's a shelf.
Hold on, let me just paste. You guys are going to love this. Crop file. Save as. L108. And we'll make this. Okay. Okay, close that. Close that. Let's see here. Go back. Sorry, guys. A lot of button pushing to get. Boom. Image. Browse. This is Steve's basement. Hold on. Let me fit the screen. There you go. Now that is just freaking awesome.
Shrink the picture down. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, everything runs on about a 20-second lag. And,
okay.
For me, it's about 30 seconds over here.
And the little 18 scale car on top of it on the shelf, the lights light up and it makes an engine sound.
Oh, man, that is awesome. And while we're in there, let me just... Barry, is that the actual Christine, or is that just one that somebody has? Didn't realize that thing had the spare tire sticking out on the trunk.
It doesn't.
Okay, I guess it might be an option package because the die-cast one doesn't, but... The
real one didn't either.
Oh, okay. So then that must be somebody's
something that somebody put on. They would call them Continental kits.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. All right. That movie was such an influence on pop culture that to this day, when we have like one of the airplanes that's particularly problematic, we call it Christine.
Okay, there we go.
But that's one more thing I need to keep me awake at night is a Christine with working lights and engine sound on the mantle. So but one other car that I did just build that was it was good, a straightforward kit, of course, was a Supernatural Impala, and it's a good solid kit. I mean, no complaints about it. A little trouble getting the front end to sit down, getting the hood to mount, seal up. And I've noticed that with model cars a lot, that a lot of times getting the body to sit down, especially the front end of the frame, everything's the way it's supposed to be. It's just there's something down there wants to keep springing it back up. That seems to be a bit of a recurrent issue. Had that problem with the Impala and with the Mustang. Enough glue and big enough clamps, she'll bite the frame and stay down. But
the problem usually is in model kits when it doesn't fit like that. is the floor of the interior is usually preventing it from the frame from sitting up further, or the cowl, the firewall. And sometimes you got to cut the bottom of the firewall to be able to get the front end to go up further into the body.
Okay. Well,
it's a common occurrence.
All right. Well, next time I'll consider to bring that off and shaving it down a little bit. The one car that, it's funny. I was really surprised that, given how many Impala kits are out there, they didn't have this kit out until the show was off the air, which is odd. And it ran 15 seasons, and the car was extremely popular. But they had all these two-door Impala kits, and some guys are kit bashing and doing all this other stuff. But it's really hard to get they're shaped pretty differently. And of course, even the four-door hardtop, which this is, has got a different hood, roof line than the four-door sedan, and it's a little sportier. But they finally made it, and I've been wanting to get one. And I had the big die-cast one, but now I have the model. And thanks to Caleb sending me those little resin Sam and Dean, I'll be able to put some figures with it once I get them painted. And then another car that was only in the beginning of the show, but became a fan favorite, is, of course, the Prisoner's Lotus. And I couldn't find an actual kit that had a TV show tie-in. Tamiya makes the Super 7 Series 2, and I believe he was driving an S2 Series Super 7, so I think it's the right car. I was just kind of surprised that seemed to be one that they would have... of course, I don't know when the kit came out. It's probably not an old kit. Most likely the show was...
The kit came out way after the show.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And, so there was no tie-in there. But I couldn't talk about, the importance of, basically off the showroom floor cars without talking about the Prisoner, because, it's the main thing you see. It's the very thing you see at the very opening. But of course, you guys have seen me talk about this before, but we've, of course, got the Mustang from the Mach 1 from the James Bond. Was it Diamonds Are Forever? Yeah. And apparently, despite the car trickery they did riding around on two wheels, as I recall, it was still supposed to be a rental car, I think. So it's still
yes, it was.
By the way, speaking of Mach 1, since we have that up here, I just watched a little documentary about the Mach 1 Mustang, but you're better versed in it than I am. I always wondered why they decided to come out with a bigger Mustang, and that was that guy's name Knudsen or something, or.
Yeah, well, when Duncan Knudsen, he was in charge of the Pontiac division over at GM, and Iacocca was kind of up to be president, and even though Iacocca was very, very successful at Ford, and he was kind of a wonderkind, him and Henry Ford just didn't hit it off. So Henry brought in Knudsen and made him president of Ford.
Mm-hmm.
So when it became, so Knudsen being at Pontiac, they were well known. Their big thing was wide track Pontiacs, which were bigger, wider, longer cars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the influence he put on the Mustang. He wanted it to be a bigger car.
But it's really a completely different car than its predecessor, right?
Yeah, it was an evolution. I mean, the 71 was pretty much the same as this, 69 and 70, but it was a little bit more streamlined. But it was a heavier car,
mm-hmm.
And we're talking 71 was when the government started to put the clamps on the high performance stuff and started to smog everything up.
Uh-huh.
So, they're putting bigger engines in these cars and they're making them heavier because they need a bigger engine to get more power because they're choked up. And that was how the car became, heavy. I mean, they were really good looking cars.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautiful, yeah. They're my favorite looking Mustang.
I don't know anybody who had one who didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
They were nice cars. It was just a sign of the times.
Yeah, we had a family friend that had one. He loved it.
That way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one of the Glue Troopers is building one to go with the Galaxy. He wants to make like a traffic stop diorama, and there's some progress photo he sent me. But it was interesting. I don't know if Ford gave him the car or what. I just thought it was kind of interesting that James Bond, he always gets the tricked out cars like the floating Lotus, and all that stuff, the submarine. But you rarely see, I think, in James Bond, except for maybe in The Man with the Golden Gun, where they do that 360 roll in the little econo car. I forget what, the Hornet or whatever, that they jump in the bridge in Bangkok, wherever it's supposed to be. But this is one of the few times you see Bond. You see just a regular old, American stock car get so much camera time on a Bond flick.
Well, that's because it was filmed in the U.S.
Yeah, true.
So they kind of played to it. And basically, when you see that whole chase scene where he does the thing through the parking lot, the car goes through the alley on two wheels, I mean, it was kind of like, oh, well, this is how good James Bond is, what he can do with, any car,
Okay.
I mean, heck, he drove the moon buggy.
That's right. Hi, golly.
Which Dean Jeffries built.
But of course. Yeah, it had to be fun into that plexiglass bubble in the desert sun.
Oh, God. That'd be ridiculous.
Well, the next thing we got was, talking about tie-ins, is somebody had sent me an email or left a comment that Mannix they made the Mannix cars. And I was like, okay, let's look at it. Sure enough. And I remember the Mannix detective series. And although I never really thought of the car as being that big of a character, he did always seem to drive a convertible. But I was like, it must have been popular because they made two of them. They made the Cuda and the Roadster. And,
yeah, they made two out of the three because he had a Dodge Dart GTS in between them.
Okay. It was a convertible?
Yep. Yeah. And, the Tornado, the Roadster, I mean, Barris built that. As a matter of fact, he did all the cars, but the other two were just minor cosmetic tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
But the Roadster, I mean, he chopped the top off of the Tornado.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah. And he redid the front and the back and the hood.
Yeah, because I was like, that. It looks like a street car, like a Tornado, but it doesn't. I was like, something's not quite.
No, but it was, before they cut it up. And if you notice where the top is supposed to be in the back, there's just a tonneau cover because there's no top.
So that car didn't have a top at all.
No, because there's a lot of bracing in there to hold the thing together after they cut the top off.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised they go through that much trouble for a TV car when it's not really a big part of the car. Or maybe it is. Maybe I'm not giving it enough credit.
Well, he drove it a lot in the show. I mean, it wasn't like the Batmobile, but the car got a lot of screen time.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. Now, one straight-up stock car got a lot of screen time, of course, we all know is Magnum's, Robin Masters Ferrari 308 GTS and Magnum, which was, I remember seeing those things all over the place when I lived up in D.C. when the show was big, because, a lot of people up there had money, and it just super popularized that car, which I guess is a fine car, but,
It was a good car, But it was the car of the time to have.
Yeah. And but the tie-in on that was pretty obvious. And one tie-in that was never done was Revell had their 58 Buick or 55 Buick, and they never did a tie-in. That the 55, 58 Buicks are what they drove in that old TV show with Broderick Crawford, Highway Patrol. And I was thinking, with the nostalgia craze, you could probably repop that kit today, and with the Highway Patrol more. You in fact use that very box art, use that very black and white photo as the box art. You'd sell some of them that way, just part of the nostalgia kick.
Yeah, it was a slightly different car. I mean, the one that they drove in Highway Patrol, it had frames around the doors, frames around the windows. The model didn't.
Okay.
I mean, you could have got away with it, but it wouldn't have been, like using the Ferrari 308 for Magnum. It would have,
There'd have been differences.
Yeah.
Which they're not afraid to do. One show that I know was really good, but I didn't see it, but apparently the car was relatively a part of
that
it.
Buick kit is a 4-door kit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Inspector Morse?
Yes.
I mean, I didn't. I mean, I've seen some of it. I know it's a good show, but apparently his Jaguar was considered, a character in the show. I guess. Again, I didn't watch it, but and no one seemed to make a kid of it except for this little off-brand company. I was like, I thought every Jaguar under the sun would be made, but evidently not. The easy tie-ins though that were super easy to go to were, of course, like the police and detective shows. You had Roscoe's Cruiser and T.J. Hooker. And I imagine a lot of these models were probably already in production as when they were like, oh, hey, man, slap some sirens on this thing and we can, tie it into the TV show. I don't know about the Z28 Camaro, though. That was pretty contemporary for when Simon & Simon came out.
That was a regular inline kit.
Okay, so they just had to slap the
license on it.
Yeah, and the Starsky and Hutch, that was a straight up Gran Torino for the most part. At least the kit, I believe, was. And
which has to be the ugliest car ever put on 4 wheels.
you really don't like that paint
scheme. And the most ridiculously obvious cop car in the world. You can spot this thing coming 2 miles away. I mean,
But I don't know what they were saying, But apparently I know a guy that bought that exact car, except instead of the red and white paint scheme, it was green and white, but it was the same scheme. And when we got out of Army base again, it was already a couple of years old, but man, I remember that car being super popular.
Roy came up with an interesting one, which they never did, which would be Banachek's Packard.
Yeah, well, I think that actually belonged to his chauffeur. If I remember correctly, he hired the car and the driver.
That would have made a good kit.
Really? I didn't think about that one. Always with the old Polish proverbs.
Yeah. And he would always outsmart the insurance company guy.
Yeah. The thing I remember about Starsky and Hutch is that, I think it was, I still think Hutch was the blonde guy, was David Soul, I think. And Starsky was the brunette, as I recall, Brian Glazer. They both went on to very big careers in Hollywood, but I think it was Hutch carried that big silver python, and Starsky was carrying a 9mm back when it was rare for cops to carry automatics. And the show was, it was a proto Miami Vice. Young guys, cool car, and
it was low end Miami Vice in L.A.
Yeah, before there was a Miami Vice. And the T.J. Hooker car, I think that was already in production. Probably Roscoe's was also. And they just, hey, look, popular show. Let's just stick them on there. And, hey, why not? Like I say, it's a sales gimmick. The motorcycles from Chips, I don't really know if that kit was already in production. But I remember that show was super popular. I was like, and it was made for, 14-year-old boys, I guess. But, I don't know. A lot of girls I know like to watch it for Punch. My sister's, Punch is on. I'm like, okay. But I don't know if that box comes with 1 or 2 motorcycles. I assume it only comes with 1. But molded in color. All right, which color? Because they're black and white.
Black and white.
But you know that Eric Estrada did not know how to ride a motorcycle, and of course most of the filming, the front of the bikes they were on trailers. But Larry Wilcox was an experienced motorcyclist, so he actually taught Eric Estrada how to ride, and which is not normally something you would think the actor would do, but I guess they're like, well, he wanted to learn, he's willing to teach. But other than the police equipment, they're pretty much just off-the-shelf motorcycles. Now, the kits I'm going to do next, everybody knew was coming, and this is about as cool and badass as off-the-shelf gets. And, of course, that's the 2 main protagonist racing cars in Bullitt. the 68 Mustang GT and the 68 Charger RT. And it to me is probably one of the best uses of what were essentially stock cars in Hollywood. And despite losing more hubcaps than they had hubs, Bill Hickman and Steve McQueen and whoever it was they put in Steve McQueen's place, they did a real good. That I still think is one of Hollywood's best car chases. And I haven't. I hadn't built that Mustang, but I'm assuming it's not that much different than the one I just built. So I would imagine these kits have been around long enough that they're not particularly hard to find or difficult to build. I imagine they got the kinks worked out of them. I'm not sure what shade of green Bullitt's car was. It seems to be is that a forest green or?
Island green.
Island green. And of course the RT was just black. There's a diorama begging to be made.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. The Charger originally was blue.
Really?
Yes, and if you watch the movie towards the end where the two of them hit into each other side by side, and there's a part where Bullitt hits the Charger and rips the door handle off, you can see the blue paint around where the door handle was.
Ah.
What happened was they needed a Charger, and they went and bought one off a showroom floor, and it was blue, and they said, well, it should be black, and they painted it.
Okay. Straightforward enough. But the other tie-in car that I thought was really good, was a very popular car, of course, was the 71 Cuda that Nash Bridges drove around in, which I actually know someone that had a Cuda years ago, and poor fellow fell asleep with a wheel and totaled it. But luckily it wasn't hurt. But it was a beautiful car. Although it looks a little, to me, the Cuda always looked a little bit like the Challenger, but.
Well, it was basically it's the same car with just some cosmetic tweaks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, the Cuda came out first. Well, no, excuse me. The Cuda, Barracuda or Cuda came out in 1964. Mm-hmm. The original one with the big glass window in the back.
We had one.
Came out 2 weeks before the Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
Mustang came out, that got forgotten. So basically, they changed the body design in 67, and it went 67, 68, 69, and then they changed it in 1970 to look like the 71 that you see here. Dodge at that point did not have a car in the pony car category. They introduced the Challenger at the same time they introduced the new Cuda in 1970. So if you look at the two of them together, with the exception of some trim differences and some interior differences, it's pretty much the same car.
Huh. Well, there you go. That explains that. Yeah, I understand that's like $1 million car now.
Oh, if it's a Hemi convertible, which I think they only made 13, it's like $2-3 million.
So what's Cop going to San Francisco doing driving around in one of those?
No, it had a 383 in it, but it had the shaker hood and it said Hemi on it because it didn't have a Hemi. Because you couldn't drive that car around in the street. I mean, that just wasn't made to be driven around every day in the street.
Mm-hmm. Well, one show that the car was pretty substantial, I know like a lot of cop shows, was Adam 12. And I was disappointed to learn that it was that is a fake box art that somebody made. I found a guy, there's a guy on there who makes box art and obviously does a real nice job, usually labels them AMT or MPC. For cars that were never made. And I don't know if he's drawn the pictures himself or how he's doing it. He does great work, but there are a lot of accoutrements available. You can get the can red lights and the resin reed and Malloy. You can get their decal sheets for sale. But and one company was making the 4-door Belvedere 69 resin body. But they never actually made a kit of the Adam 12 car, which surprised me because that show was on a long time and was very popular. And
yeah, it was.
And speaking of fake box art, all of these are fake. And some of them I was like, oh, look, somebody finally made that thing. Like, no, they didn't. I remember Doctari seeing it at the theater. And I was also surprised no one made the cruisers from Andy Griffith's show. I mean, there's some resin stuff made. No one made the Rockford Files Firebird, and that.
If my memory serves me correctly, because I didn't watch Rockford Files a lot. I think the front end of that one is wrong for the car that was.
They change the car every year for about 4 years, I believe.
Okay.
Garner didn't like the later, so I think it was after the 4th year the show was on. I forget, it was the 79s came out. He didn't like the front end on them. So well, it's a fake box art, so you're probably right. But Garner didn't like, and he was a big car guy. He did a lot of his own driving.
Yeah, he was.
And he made a lot of Mazda cars so he could spin it around and everything. He loved doing that stuff. But I forget the exact years, but around 79 he says these are ugly, so he just kept the last one for the rest of the run.
He starred in one of the greatest car movies of all time.
Oh,
Grand Prix.
Grand Prix, gosh, I kept wanting to say Monte Carlo. And the Country Squire wagon is, if you guys have ever seen Steve McQueen in the movie The Getaway, I was like, that's an interesting selection. Yeah. But all of these are fake box art, and some of them are in shrink wrap. They're actually fake boxes in some cases. And the far left bottom, the Dictari one, I guess he did a long time ago, is he even got like the water stains and everything on it. It's like, man, these are some talented people, making this stuff. And they're actually, I don't know how they're making the boxes. I don't know that much about printing. But I'm like, you got to soak some money in something like that, I would think. And one other that I found interesting was the fake GTO wagon kit. They never made the kit. They never made the box art or the box, but somebody went through all that trouble. And that's, I got to admit, I'm impressed.
Well, that one on the right's a 65. And the one on the left's a 67.
That's the only picture I could find of a wagon that showed
okay.
him. And it didn't have the year marked. I know it looked a little wrong. But still, I just thought it was just really interesting to go through all that much trouble. Then there were some kits I thought should have been made that never were. Of course, Rockford's, okay, it was 74 to 79, Firebird Esprit. And the after 79, I don't think he liked the new one, so that's why he stayed with that. Somebody had asked about the Saint. There's his Morris Oxford. Colombo's Peugeot. I know you don't like that car because it's a little claddle trap car, but still iconic. And I just threw in, I thought, the 69 Vista Cruiser wagon from that 70s show would have been a good one. There's marketing opportunity right there for all of the...
they never did cars from the Cannonball Run.
Well, that's true.
Or the Gumball Rally.
Yeah.
And there were kits of those cars.
Fair enough. So that was pretty much it for the stock car, what I was able to put together on the stock cars that were iconic vehicles in television and movies, but were more or less representative cars that would have been bought, on the street and or on a lot and seen on the street. And there are others, of course. Don's pointing out they didn't make from the Gumball Rally for the Great Race. But those weren't stock cars. Those were, special made cars. But still, there's specialty cars that they never made that they could have. Kind of surprised they didn't because the movies were pretty popular and everything. You would have thought it'd been one more way for them to get their stuff out there.
You know what I'd like to see a model kit of?
What?
that's not necessarily a movie car, but it is a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
The Wienermobile.
Well, you can get the whistle.
I know, but I mean, nobody's ever made a model of the Wienermobile.
I wonder what rights would be required
I think
for
that would be a great snap kit for, kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I wish I was gonna scare my wiener. Oh, we all know that show. The Micro Tunes. But there are a lot of cars like the ones from Demolition Man, and I mean the movies just go on. But I don't know. There's. Oh, wait a minute. I'm missing a slide. There's something we didn't get to. I wonder if I didn't load it. Let me check real quick. It's not critical, but we all know they make models of Black Beauty from the Green Hornet. But yeah, I missed it. But they also made the 66 Chrysler 300, which is a regular driver, and that could have been another marketing opportunity for them.
Well, round two's coming out with a 125th scale or 4th scale Black Beauty.
Yeah, but I'm talking about his convertible, the white one.
Yeah, no. The only kit they ever had was that Johan, annual kit, and you cannot find that thing to save your life.
And knowing what happened to Johan, the molds are probably long since destroyed.
Well, I've tried to find that kit because I have my own little project I want to do when they come out with the Black Beauty, but I found a hardtop promo of the 300, and I'm busy lopping the roof off of it to make that car.
Ah, well, then we agree this was a missed opportunity then.
Absolutely. And when I get both kits, I'm going to make a diorama that I think a lot of the troopers will like to see.
Well, I wonder whatever happened to the 110 scale ones that Andy and his guys made at Aurora. My guess is they're hidden in some private collection.
They'd have to be, but nobody knows anything about them. No one.
If they do, they're not saying.
You don't even hear a peep about them.
Just please don't let someone have gone, and thrown them away.
Well, that would be an absolute crime. Really would. And you would think that, it's taken a while to come out with this kit of the Black Beauty that's going to be in 24th scale. Because it did take a long time to come out with the TV Batmobile movies that were in 24 scale that were of good quality.
Uh-huh.
Aurora made both kits, in the smaller scale, and they were pretty popular kits when they first came out because the shows were new. But, they never really did anything with the Green Hornet because they were off the air in a year.
Yeah, I tend to forget that was a one-season show.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good show, but it was serious as opposed to Batman, which was more kind of popish.
Camp.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Now I have used my last slide. So, guys, what else have we got going on here? Let's see. Put on my closer reading glasses, not my farther reading glasses. See what everybody's saying. I had an Oscar Mayer Wiener whistle for a while. I don't know where it got off to. But they did not make models from the Great Race. So, yeah, everybody, yeah. The Green Hornet. Unfortunately, I don't know about you guys. I don't want to play movie critic, but wasn't impressed with the movie that they put out recently. I don't think it had the spirit of the original show.
The Seth Rogen one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of stupid. And the car, I saw the car at SEMA.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sorry, it to me it just paled by comparison to the one that Dean Jeffries built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you get much argument over that. Well, let me get something to show you guys. That's right over here.
Chris, they make a small diorama in 64th scale. Greenlight makes it of both the Bullitt Mustang and the Charger jumping the streets in San Francisco.
So, my wife got me that Aurora Era Commander, which, of course, as you know, the box is already on display up on the fireplace. And she was kind of surprised by how small it was. Just thought I would show you guys that's how big the model is. And I'm not sure if it's actually 1/72 scale. They made these things at kind of off scales. I think they were box scale. But
Diane wants to know if you got a chance to check out the link she sent you.
Which link was that?
Do not know. Just says the link I sent you.
Let me see. I try to check out links people send me. I got a couple today. Let's see. It was with Diane. Let me. I'm not seeing. I am not seeing anything here. When was that? These are all pictures, not links. Bombers in the Marsh. I'm not sure. I'm not.
Diane, A-26 bombers that crashed in World War II.
No, I have not. Let me see. I am not seeing it. Did I give you a reply to it? Because I don't see that. I don't think so. Well, can always resend it. Now, A-26s, are the invaders? I did see some footage which I can't locate anymore. It's enough to make any historian or pilot cry of the B-26s at the end of the war, the Marauders that were blown up by the U.S. Army. It was too expensive to bring them back. The Army Air Corps didn't need them anymore, but except for the French Air Force, they were afraid they would fall into hands that they didn't want having them. So they went boom, and they put the explosives in the cockpits and just blew them in half. And I'm like, it's enough to make you weep. There's exactly like 3 of those things left in museums. One is sort of in flying condition, belongs to Kermit Weeks, but I don't think he's ever going to fly it again. And it's the early model with the short wings. They're going to crash in the Brantfield. Ow. The Air Commander was this little Air Commander was originally a Comet kit, and typical of Comet kits, it does not have any landing gear or anything. And I had considered, I wonder if I want to try and modify it, put a gear on it. I was like, nah, that's a little too much. You know, typical of the old Comet kits, it's got the, I don't know if you can make it out, but it's got the lettering embossed on it for the decals. So if you're that worried about it, you can always sand that down. But this is it's a day build kit, but it could take a little while to paint. And before I do anything, though, I need to take it out to the Tarbis and shoot the inside of it. I think I'll make the inside gray. Doesn't have an actual interior, but that's okay. The clear parts are so thick you wouldn't be able to see through them anyway. But let's see here. You can see that's the sum total of the instruction sheet. This thing it says 50 cents on the side of the box, and they run about $50 now. But this was actually in the Aurora box because we really got the box of the box art, but I'm going to build that and put that on the shelf of my other Aurora kits. Aurora made that, or Comet made that. The Apache, I actually had the Apache box up here, and the Cessna 310. The Aurora made the Cherokee, the Aztec, and eventually the Jet Commander. They also made the Cessna 172 and the Learjet, but the company that was supposed to cut the molds over in Portugal did just such a bad job, they scrapped them. And when you think about what it takes for a company to scrap molds, given how expensive they are, they must have really been bad.
Garfield just sent you that file, and Diane resent it, so it should be popping up on your computer.
Let me take a real quick look at that. Apologize if anybody if I missed your... Okay, it'll be a little while before it gets here. I seem to be having some issues. We lost the internet earlier. We had some thunder boomers roll through, and we only lost power for a second, but the internet went down for a short while, so things have been a little slow. So, let's see. Okay, the comment stream stop, or am I just still having slow download here? So, what's everybody working on? I have the Tiger tank over here with all the wheels on it now. I've got the little Aero Commander here. That's what I have going on in the house. Almost got started on another model, but I realized I'm running out of desk space really fast, so I need to, if I'm going to spread my wings out, that needs to be out in the shed, because I still have about 4 projects live there. I still got to get on that Topolino, that little Keeler's Custom. I haven't touched that in a while. It's actually nearing completion, but I think I'm going to repaint the body on it. I don't like the color that I chose. I always find that when you're, for me personally, a lot of times I like to use subdued colors on stuff because it just gives sort of a flatter, more, I guess you'd call it real world look. But on something like that, I think I need to go with a brighter color because it is a sports car, a yellow or a red or a bright green. Hey, need them. Let's see. For some reason, my iPad stacks a couple of stationary messages at the bottom. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, nobody's sitting there. Oh, no, they're all moving up higher. Here's a riddle. What is very small yet consumes all of your space? Okay, what is very small yet consumes all of your space? Radiation? Okay, nothing's popped up yet. That's weird. Newest on top, yeah. Email hasn't populated yet. Well, I'll go back to my screen here where I can see what I'm doing. (1826) locomotive. 57 Bel Air, F-22, 68 Mustang GT. There we go. Nah, no, I'm actually behind in your room. What am I looking at? You're surrounded by them. Boxes? Because boxes are small, but they consume space. Oh, by the way, I got a Father's Day gift from my sister-in-law. I got Godzilla socks. I'm wearing a pair right now. But somehow Cup of Noodles is involved in this. They're the Cup of Noodles Godzilla socks because nothing goes with Godzilla like a cup of noodles. What was that one subject you were ranting about in the last stream? That had separate hinges. I thought he was talking about that ME262, but separate hinges. Oh, yeah, that's the ME262. Yeah, that is this kit by MPM. And literally, the landing gear doors, the doors, have little tiny brass hinges that you have to glue onto them. That's going to be fun. It'll be fun till the model takes the sanity away. Needs nice small points. Yeah, I had them hanging all up in the old Tarbis, but believe it or not, it actually had a higher arched roof. Guilo's sock with camo. Built that as a kid. Maria, the robot from Metropolis. I saw that at Model Palooza when they had the prototypes on display. The monogram Stuka built, or J87 built that a few times. Steve, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm reading and responding to the comments.
At least the ME262 only has 3 wheels. Yeah. Here's the Tiger that I've been working on. And this, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this side does not have the outer wheels on it yet. And I'm putting the track there. This side already has all of them on it. And I'm going to wait till I get this finished before I put this last set of wheels, glue this last set of wheels on. And okay. It's weird, the tracks on these things. The Germans use these gargantuan tracks. And I'm not even sure how that's going to fit on there.
I like how you can store the wheels inside the tank.
Man. Well, the wheels go right out to the edge of the track when you have them all under. They could remove the outer wheels, I think, for transportation on trains. But you could also, they didn't have to have all those wheels. There's actually some footage out there of a captured hunting tiger. And, like, all of the wheels right here, all of them misses a huge gap there. And obviously, maintenance on those things was a bloody nightmare. If you blew a track or something damaged one of the inner wheels, you had to pull all those outer wheels, then the other outer wheels, so you get the inner wheels out, so you get the other. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And although they rode really nice, they had good flotation, especially for something so heavy, and they needed that support. It was a system that was just not one that was prone for good field repair. The Tiger was supposed to be a breakthrough tank, breakthrough defenses, and then the regular, Panthers and Mark IVs are supposed to go in and do everything after that. But, they wound up having to use them as conventional tanks in the conventional tank role, which they were not intended for. And that's one of the reasons they started breaking so much. And that and the loss of experienced crews, half of tank training is maintenance. And when you lose these experienced guys, you not only lose a good gunner or whatever, but you lose someone who knows how to take care of the tank, how to drive it. And they said that most likely poorly trained German drivers probably knocked out as many Tiger tanks as the enemy did, just by being too harsh on the controls. And big as it is, you got to be delicate with it, and you got to know what you're doing. And you see the famous photos of all these GIs walking through cities with the knocked out Tigers in the ditch on the side, but usually that was done by the Germans. They broke it or ran out of fuel. Like, well, we're not going to leave it for the enemy. And they blow it up and go ahead on their way. So a lot of that carnage was self-inflicted. And, of course, God, you realize that only a couple of years before the Tiger, most tanks weighed about 15, 20 tons. And only 4, 5, 6 years later, they have literally 50, 60-ton tanks. That, from a weight category, actually almost virtually outpaces the advances in aircraft. And they're putting these monster guns on them that you can't make a tank that can resist that kind of incoming fire. It's just... if you made a tank armored well enough to survive a German 88, the tank would sink in the mud. Heck, it would sink in the concrete. Which is, of course, why tanks like the Tigers had to have such wide tracks on them for flotation. Break up the footprint, or create a larger footprint, I should say. Break up the weight per square inch or square foot. Or ton per square foot. But ironically, that's one of the complaints a lot of the people who take Godzilla movies way too seriously. I mean, they're like, you know, if Godzilla was real, he would sink into the ground under his own weight. And admittedly, but like, yeah, you ever notice, you know, he has really big feet. And, it's, people, learn to enjoy a movie. Yeah, German vehicle recovery was pretty spotty at best. That is true. The thing is, virtually every model builder who likes to do military hardware has a fascination with German equipment because they made so much cool stuff. I mean, they just did. But you know, we made some pretty cool stuff too. Yeah, let me show you something. This is the Pogo. I want to thank Paul over in New Zealand for sending this to me. These pictures. And what's really cool about this KP model is they give you the markings of an operational aircraft so that, you know, you can build your... And one thing I like to do is, every once in a while, is to build an experimental aircraft in operational squadron colors, or build an aircraft and put it in the colors of a country that didn't use it. And I think it just adds a little something to it. And the Pogo was actually a successful aircraft in many regards. I think it had that T-70 Allison early version turboprop, which was pretty problematic, but they all were back then. The biggest problem they had with this thing, of course, was landing it, because it had to come down. And the pilot who flew it said, man, the thing just moved like a bullet. Had that gigantic contra-rotating prop out there with a good turbine engine, or a powerful turbine engine turning it. If they could have worked out the landing issue, they who knows, that thing might have been fielded, but they didn't. So, and then other stuff came along, but and aircraft like that and things like German armor, German aircraft, they're just extremely interesting. The Germans were always coming up with novel stuff, and even when they had something that didn't work out that well, they would go ahead and field it. The Elephant was, basically Porsche's failed attempt to make a Tiger tank. They built about 90 chassis, and they didn't want to just throw them away. So they, what happened here? Cigar is broken.
John Ashley wants to know, how many Tigers were actually constructed?
Okay, if I remember correctly, there were about 90 of the Ferdinands, which I think we called Elephants. It had the 88mm gun. This was Ferdinand Porsche's failed attempt to be the Tiger tank, so they just built the casemates on them. And these things had all kinds of transmission problems. So they only built about 1,500, I want to say 1,500 Tiger 1s and about 500 or 600 Tiger 2s to our 48,000 Shermans. And they built about 80 of these monsters, the Hunting Tiger. which it's basically a Tiger II with an extended body and an extra set of road wheels. And they put the casemate on there with a 128 millimeter gun, basically a 5-inch gun. And they only made, I think, 80 of these. They were lethal. The idea was something like this was supposed to fire as an overwatch weapon, back behind the advancing Germans and shoot long range and blow up enemy stuff. And then your regular Panthers and everything could come in and finish the job. This was supposed to be the actual, 40 ton Panther was supposed to be the actual fighting tank. High velocity 75, much more reasonable gun. And you look at the Tiger and the Panther next to each other, and you realize the Tiger isn't really that much bigger. Oops, good. Everything works in reverse, Max. But it's a lot heavier. And the problem they ran into, though, was even though they had about, I think, 1,500 of them, if I remember correctly, they never had all of them in service at one time. There were no more than a third of them, no more than probably 500 were in action at any one time, because they had to go back to depot level maintenance. The Panther, if you wanted to pull the transmission out, which you had to do every few thousand miles, they also had shorter range transmissions. I think the Sherman, I want to say the transmission was good for about 3,000 miles, and for the Panther, like 1,000 or 1,200, something like that. But to pull the transmission off a Sherman, you just unbolted all the bolts on front, and it came off. You stuck another one on, and you were in and out in a couple hours. But on the Panther, the first part of removing the transmission was to remove the gun and the mantlet, because you had to have a special tool that reached inside the turret and came back inside, hooked onto the transmission, lifted it up, pulled it backwards, pulled it up, and pulled it out where the gun had been mounted. So it took a lot of equipment. Again, the German stuff wasn't made for good field maintenance, ease of field maintenance. I mean, they were deadly on the battlefield, but if you wound up, breaking the thing, you had real problems, which is one of the reasons you
Sounds like the Mercedes today. Sluggo wants to know, do you know if Glamorous Glen 111 had black and white stripes on the wings, or just black stripes?
You talking about the Bell X1 Glamorous Glennis? Or
no. It says Glamorous Glen 111 had white and black stripes on wings, or just black stripes?
I don't know.
Is this the plane that Jaeger flew during World War II?
I do not know his paint scheme. I did know he went through a few Mustangs. He's one of the few pilots that was allowed back into combat in Europe after having escaped, because the concern was if you got shot down a second time, got captured, you could give up the escape network. But I think at this point they pushed the Germans out.
One of the troopers Googled it and found the answer. It was black and white.
Okay, well, there you go. The final drives are Achilles heel at best. Yeah, they were also late in the war. They were run out of I think it was manganese or magnesium that they needed for good welding, and so a lot of the tanks were having bad weld seams. Saw a picture of a Panther that took a hit from an American 75, and it split the mantlet off the turret. It didn't go through it; it just made it break off, which of course put the tank out of action. Jaeger had he'd been shot down. He'd escaped through Spain, I believe, and I want to say he went through the Pyrenees. Gets back, they're going to send him stateside, but or to the Pacific Theater. But like once you've been shot down, you can't go back. But he lobbied to go back with his unit. But at this point, we pushed the Germans so far back that where he had escaped from was now in friendly territory, so it was irrelevant. So they let him go back into combat. I believe that was how that worked. And
Ron asked the question. He says, "Do today's tanks and planes have they fallen into the same trap, being very capable but very expensive and difficult to maintain in the field?"
They are very expensive, but ease of maintenance is a big part of design these days. When I was in, we had the Hueys and we had the Blackhawks. And what was interesting is that the Huey, although a simpler aircraft, was the Blackhawk was far more complicated, but everything was like module replacement. Pull this up, put that in. It was ease of a lot like on the Apache. A lot of the panels opened up into steps or work areas, walkways, so you could pop it open, stand on it, and work on the. So ease of maintenance was built into, which is important because they are more complicated, but they are also more capable in return. The tank's the same thing, far more complex, but ease of maintenance has been worked into it. They can drop an engine in an Abrams. I think they can swap an engine in less than an hour. And the transmissions are, my understanding is though, the transmissions are not something that you can do a field repair on. In fact, the engine's relatively small compared to the transmission, but they're also extremely well made. My understanding is they don't have that much trouble with them. The Chieftain was talking about, I forget if they hit a mine or what it was, but they had to remove 2 sets of road wheels from one side of the tank, and they were able to keep driving. And they actually, I think he said one of the problems they have is, since torsion bar suspension, where you have the bar that goes all the way through the tank to the other side, and basically flexes, if you break one of those, you are not repairing that in the field. And that is depot level stuff, is my understanding. But the tanks can run with several of the wheels missing. They just stretch the track. And I think the Chieftain said he fought half the Gulf War with one set of road wheels missing. It just didn't have time to fix it and really didn't slow him down that much. That would have been a bigger problem if you hit some kind of soft terrain where flotation became a big issue. But yeah, the tanks these days are far more expensive. More maintenance, there's more things to take care of, but it seems like it's easier to take care of them provided you have a good part supply. And they seem to have less downtime, but they do drink more fuel. But the overall, though, that the things are so bloody lethal that, a World War II tank was just a rolling box of armor, with a gun. And nowadays, they've got so many systems on tanks, it's unbelievable. They have they only have a lot of times like the Chobham armor and everything, but a lot of times they have the reactive armor, then that explodes outward if they get hit. Some of them have like the trophy system that actually has a device that shoots an incoming missile and blows it up before it gets to you. So they have to have the little radars all around them, the thermal equipment, the night sight, the long range, the gyroscopic gun, all that stuff. The computers, they are very, very sophisticated machines. And the ability to fire on the move is something that, 40 or 50 years ago, tankers could only have dreamed of. And you kind of have to have that technology if there's any kind of a near-peer threat. And it is expensive. Airplanes are the same way. But, God, modern missilery is so deadly. Every country out there, and it's getting harder and harder to countermeasure, which is one of the reasons I think they're looking towards drones. When you think about it, in our lifetime, the number of people we lost in Vietnam in a year, the pilots and infantry and all the other stuff, if you fought a war like that today, I don't think most countries' governments have the will to take those kinds of casualties. So they invest, if they're smart, they invest heavily in good technology. They won't have to. Ironically, and this is kind of the funny a lot of countries' militaries are to meet like NATO commitments. Like New Zealand, when I was down there, they were talking about the only thing they use their military for is New Zealand had international commitments, like a lot of countries do, to the UN and everything. So they had to keep an army to do that. But domestically inside the country, they were like, no one's going to attack us. We're 1,000 miles from anybody. And we're too small if some major power did attack us. We could never field a large enough army. We couldn't afford a large enough army. So this is why, of course, treaties and everything are so important. But some countries, though, have started realizing with what's going on in Ukraine that maybe they better start investing and upgrading and stuff. You're not going to believe who like the most militarized, heavily armed country in Europe is, if I'm not mistaken. You there, Steve?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I was going to say, you're not going to guess who my understanding, the most heavily militarized country in Europe is.
Spain?
Sweden.
Sweden. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Sweden's heavily armed also. Switzerland per capita.
That's because they give everybody those little knives that have 900 different little things on there. So they're prepared for anything.
Like that one? You even got my little Swiss flag on it. No, it's my understanding that one of the reasons the Swiss are so heavily... Now, I remember we're talking per capita. But apparently they spend more per capita on defense than almost any other country out there, except maybe the U.S. And the Russians. But the reason is that because they are a neutral country, they don't have a lot of treaties with other people. If somebody comes after them, they've got to be able to defend themselves. And they actually have a reasonable standing army with a huge reserve force, mandatory conscription, military service. I mean, it's, people think, oh, the Swiss, they're neutral, they're harmless. No. They're neutral, but they're armed to the friggin' teeth so that they can stay neutral. And neutrality comes at a cost. During World War II, the Swiss were flying Messerschmitt 109s. They didn't have a lot of them, but they'd gotten them from the Germans, obviously. And when the war started brewing and they realized that they may not be able to maintain their supplies, although they already had their own aircraft factory, they started upgrading their air force with the domestic products as much as they could. And they were adamant, if you come straying over Switzerland, we're going to shoot at you, because obviously. And they shot at both American, British, and German airplanes. Well, apparently a flight of German bombers, I don't know if they strayed over or what the story was, but Swiss pounced on them. And I think they shot a couple of them down. And of course, the Germans are outraged and cut off all their parts for Messerschmitts. So, of course, they were capable of fabricating their own, but still, they were ahead. They expected that to happen. And they were in no mood to grant concessions. And when you don't want to grant concessions, you better be able to fight. And Hitler had, as I'm not mistaken, he had looked at invading Switzerland, but the generals basically convinced him, look, they don't have anything we need, and they're behind that mountain fortress. There's no way the tanks are going to get through. They could defend forever. They're food independent, so that's just going to be a waste of resources, and they let it go. But only because they were ready, and still are to this day ready to defend. They've got good armor. They've got good artillery. A lot of their jets are hidden in mountain caves and everything, or at least they used to be. I don't know if I assume they still do that. They have upgraded their Air Force, and they manufacture that Saab Gripen, and my understanding, that's a pretty spiffy little airplane, quite capable. So,
we're going to have an air show tomorrow and Sunday at Ocean City, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And the Thunderbirds are going to be there, and the F-18 team is going to be there, and the F-35 team is going to be there, and there's a whole bunch of military teams. I was in Northern Virginia today, and I got on the coast, and I got a flat tire, and I had to go to a Firestone place and have them fix the tire. Well, they were practicing for the show over Ocean City. And one of the F-18s, I guess, just was making a pass. I thought the building was going to come down. He was so low and so fast. It was unbelievable.
That's what they do.
It was. The guy must have thought he was Maverick. I really think, because I was standing just outside the building, and all of a sudden I could hear something, and the whole building started to rattle. And when he came over, I thought the building was going to explode. And I was like, wow, that was fast.
Yeah, those things are loud. People used to lament when the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds quit using the F-4 Phantoms, because the airplanes, they just made such a big roar when they came over. And, I mean, it was impressive. But they were big and heavy and expensive to operate and had two-man crews, and weren't necessarily all that maneuverable by comparison. They had a few cases where they swapped paint. So the Navy went with the A-4 Skyhawk, and the Air Force went with the T-38s, and that brought the cost down, and they had smaller, more agile aircraft. So the F-18s are kind of a step back up to a bigger airplane. And they can do a lot in the F-18 they couldn't do in the A-4s. But one of the problems they have is that these teams, they have pretty high requirements to try out for the team, and it's a very difficult thing to stay proficient in unless you're flying a lot. And generally speaking, fighter pilots these days don't get to fly a lot because planes are so bloody expensive to operate. And they've had times when the teams have had to stand down because of training issues and stuff. So it's incredibly demanding. And I got nothing but respect for the people. First off, I got nothing but respect for anyone who gets through military flight school. That is a sink or swim program, especially if you're going to go bounce jets off of carriers. And if you're going to do that Blue Angels or Thunderbird stuff, I mean, that's worthy of genuine respect. That's some serious commitment. But unfortunately, as you know, also they've lost people on the teams. So the Air Force had one time they lost 4 jets in one maneuver. So yeah, that low and fast and lots of noise. That's what people love about the air shows. Tomcats had a growl to them, yeah. Early Tomcats had a lot of issues, but the later ones, they finally started getting them worked out. Those TF-30 engines were, well, they say never fly the A model of anything. I learned a lot of the stuff that I know just simply by talking to guys who worked on the equipment in the military or operated it. And I do enjoy watching videos where some F-14 pilot will tell you about the routine of flying the F-14 or the F-18. And one of the retired admirals was commenting that although the F-14 had capabilities the F-18 does not have, it was, for one thing, I believe it was faster. But the F-18 has a much higher reliability rate. The F-14s, a lot of them were down for maintenance a lot, especially as they got older. And the F-18 is a much more mission-ready airplane. And it's got capabilities the F-14 didn't have. But, of course, you have to remember they're also designed for different same job, sort of. But the F-14 was originally a dedicated fleet defense aircraft. Go high, go fast, get away from the fleet, go attack the enemy attackers, hundreds of miles away so they don't get near the ships. The F-18 does not have that kind of speed. I don't think it has, at least early ones, didn't have that kind of range. But they also have much more capable weapon systems and sensors and everything else. So I'm sure the Navy would love to have something that could do Mach 2.5 with modern technology on it. But, it's... Good Lord. Again, missilery's gotten so dangerous that anything gets past the fighters, it's got to go through a wall of extremely advanced missiles. And, of course, everybody's using standoff weapons now. If you go up against a near-peer threat, they'll probably launch their missile 200 or 300 miles away. But, battlefields always have been dangerous, but now they're just downright insulting.
Well, they're huge now.
Yeah.
Because things from so far away.
Well, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they have a drone now that they launch. You're going to love this. Take your trusty, dusty old C-130 with a couple of these drones hanging off of each wing. You launch them, okay? You fly hundreds or thousands of miles out to the target, wherever, Then you launch these drones. The drones fly out, launch their own missiles, turn around, come back, and you're going to love this. They have an aerial refueling system they hook to, but it reels the drone back into the airplane.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I mean, you have a piloted airplane dropping an unmanned drone, firing a smart missile, and the unmanned drone comes home to the mothership. I mean, literally the mothership. And you go home, and I'm kind of like, yep, times they are a-changing. I mean, most of us are old enough to remember when satellite, like Corona, when satellite pictures had to be dropped in a canister and snatched from a parachute by an airplane. And they didn't always get them either. And that was a specially trained Air Force squadron. That was all they did was recover those things. And that's all they trained for. It's just, it's... Of course, by the way, speaking of the drones and spies and all that other stuff, the word, I don't know I have no idea if this is true. This is just, of course, stuff I see in the news. But apparently they're reporting on they figured out what that Chinese balloon was about. we can get all these photos from satellites. What do we need these balloons for? It was a radar, a ground penetrating radar. So they could bounce that thing off the ground and read under the soil and see where like bunkers are at, or underground facilities, or what's inside buildings, that kind of stuff. So yeah, drones dropping drones. It's exactly right. And
I thought it was a means for doing direct wire transfers into certain politicians' accounts.
You're not supposed to know that, Steve. Now you have to go on that special list.
Again.
Actually, since you brought that up, we've kind of veered off of models, but it is militaria. This is, again, a news report. The Chinese have offered the Cubans it was either $7 or $9 billion with a B to let them set up basically listening posts in Cuba, which are powerful enough to pretty much scan any transmission in the American Southeast, which is where most of our military bases are at.
Nice.
That and spy balloons, I'm like, they're getting pretty aggressive. They're getting just a little too nosy. And
they're getting away with it.
Yes, they are. Of course, not like we don't have stuff in, countries surrounding them. So everybody's got their satellites. It's an ongoing game of,
We have the XB-37.
Of course, you have to remember a lot of this. The Chinese are very good at the soft power thing, buying their way into places that they normally wouldn't be invited. But it's just the same old game that's gone along between nations forever. That's why we keep... the upside is we have all these cool new models coming out because people are going to make models of all this cool stuff.
Yes, and we'll make them when we're in the internment camps.
Guys, tell me something, and it's okay. I see the beautiful work a lot of these guys do on like the F-35 models and the F-22s and stuff. But are modern aircraft, how can it be aesthetically boring? The F-35, as great as an airplane as it is, to look at it, you're like, okay, but it lacks the panache of an F-104 or the visceral look of, the F-4 Phantom, or a gull-wing, the magnificent gull-wing of a Corsair. Modern jets are all very sleek and efficient and do their job great, but they just lack a certain je ne sais quoi. You look at them and you just kind of go, meh. I know it's covered in sensors and can read my heartbeat from 9 zip codes away and can launch a missile up a rat's butt from 40 miles, but to look at it, I'm just going to build something that's going to sit on the shelf, and it just kind of looks, eh. But, I'm a chubby guy, and I struggled with my weight when I was in the Army. Right now, one of the biggest problems the U.S. Army is facing, and I shouldn't giggle when I say this because it's not good, is obesity. We live in different times. You better have good weapons because seems like, I don't know. That's when you can get people doing it. What did the Army fell short 27% or something on 30% on its enlistment quotas. No wonder everybody's looking at finding machines, Because what could go wrong with an army of autonomous killer robots? Have you guys ever seen a sci-fi movie? Not all of them are Tovor. Was it Tovor?
Yes.
Yeah. And not all of them are iRobot or Tovor.
Well, didn't Elon Musk just introduce those a few weeks ago when he showed the Cybertruck?
Man. And I remember when Cyberpunk was a thing. Yeah, the Cybertruck. I don't know.
But he had those robots there when he was showing it, and they were sort of scary.
Yeah, he said the same thing. Modern cars are the same way. They all kind of look the same because I get it. Yes, Skynet is here. Yeah, well, it hasn't gone. It hasn't gone completely autonomous yet. But you have college professors giving students D's and F's because they did all their research papers with GPT chat. And how do you know that? Because he did it to see what would happen. He got like 8 of them that were almost verbatim the same. And he's like, the worst part is GPT chat is outlawing lawyers. They, I think I told you about that. They held that contest. They gave the lawyers a problem, and it was like 30 or 40 lawyers, and it took them about an hour, and they came up with something that got like a 75% positive evaluation. They gave the same thing to GPT chat. It came up with the answer in like 12 seconds or 12 minutes and got like a 91. And I'm like, oh, God. The machine. Well, I got dibs on the job changing the oil.
There you go.
But that doesn't mean you can trust them. We had a little adventure in the Airbus the other day just because the machine, and I had to do a 200-foot altitude change, so you click, and the thing just, I'm like, whoa, big fella. And, I mean, we didn't break an altitude or anything, but I was like, you don't need to be nosing up that much. Google is Skynet. It's just about there. Yeah. Okay. How do you remember this? You hand someone a credit card. Sign. There's your onion skin coffee. Oh, by the way, there was another YouTube channel I wanted to mention. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Somebody just sent me a picture talking about panache in modern jets. Okay, you guys are gonna like this one. This is the way the Royal Air Force should paint all of its planes. It worked once before. This is how Typhoons should be painted. Image. There. You'll see it in a few seconds. Now, by golly, that's a pretty jet to look at. I don't know how long it'll take before you guys see it, but it takes a while before it populates on my screen. I mean, it takes a good 20-30 seconds to make the loop. But I like that. That's what we need to do. We need to get our Air Force back to the retro paint schemes, man. Paint them like they did over Europe. Put bold colors. Even in Vietnam, when the Navy still had the bold colors on jets. Personally, I think an F-16, F-15 would look, or F-18 would look awesome in that Navy, sort of beigey gray over white with the big full color tails and everything. Canards, yeah, baby. Yeah, I know, but it's like one F-15 pilot I used to fly with said. I asked him, he was flying over, I forget, it was, I think it might have been Kosovo, one of the air suppression missions, and I was asking, do you have an autopilot on that thing or radar? And, they sort of have some equipment for that stuff, but they pretty much hand fly most of the time, although the plane's pretty stable. But he said, did you run with your radars on? He goes, oh, yeah, you have the radar on so you can see what's going on around you. I was like, yeah, but doesn't that mean the enemy can see you? And without skipping a beat, he just went, who cares? You're driving an Eagle. And I was like, that's the confidence you want in a fighter pilot. Yeah, warriors come out to play. Ditch the gray and go back to real camouflage. Heck yeah. Amen, brother. If it's supposed to be stealthy, then what do you care? But by that matter, we need to dig up the old TSR and the Avro CF-105 Aero. I want our Air Force to have a Mach 3 airplane that carries missiles. Why? Because we're Americans, and that's how we roll. And, the irony is a lot of those Cold War jets are still quite viable today. You can take a Phantom or, any of the Vietnam era platforms, slap modern radar and missiles on them, and they get real deadly real fast. Because generally speaking, these days, if you're in a turning dogfight, you've already made a pretty bad series of mistakes.
Yeah.
But the thing I keep telling people over and over again is that the reason things like maneuverability are still important, invisibility and all the, having a gun and all that other stuff, is because all of your technology can be wiped out in an instant with the stroke of a congressional pen. All they have to do is say, rules of engagement, you must visually identify the enemy first, the target, before you can shoot at it. Well, that's just great. You've just wiped out every advantage my airplane had. Because if I can see him, he can see me. And if I got to get close enough to identify him, that means I'm in range of all of his weapons. You've wiped out my long-range missiles, my radar, all that stuff. And that crap happens. Well, we don't want to risk it. Well, then we shouldn't be playing war. And Second World War. Pardon me just a second, guys. I just got to scratch here. Scratch something for a second. Okay, we're back. During the Second World War, one of my school teachers had been a Sherman bow gunner on a Sherman, just a driver, a little corporal, and he said that every town in France we came across, and when we went into Germany, because he rolled through Munich in a tank, he goes, the first thing we did was we pulled up and we loaded our gun, and the gunner knocked the top off of every church. He knocked every steeple off of every church, because that was where the German snipers loved to hide. And then they'd go through and they would just randomly machine gun big trees or anything like a place that a sniper might want to be. Okay? Machine gun the brush line in case the Germans had a Nashorn or something and they're waiting to take a pot shot at them. And that was the way, that's, I hate to say it, it's ugly, but that's how you survive a war. And now we're putting people, well, you can only fire to pun. You have to get up close and visually identify. I'm like, why not just shoot our guys down ourselves and be done with it? Because you're just begging for trouble. But, well, we don't want to risk upsetting so-and-so. We might have a fracture site. It's yes, you very well may have a fracture site. That very much could happen. And it's a shame if it does. But if everybody's doing the job right, that won't happen. But no, it's we don't want to look bad. We don't like the aggressor. Okay, so our people have to suck it up and lose every advantage that we spent billions of dollars giving them, so that we don't look bad. What was it John Candy said in 1941? What are we? We're going to paint the scratches. We're going to go back to the base, paint the scratches on the tank, and pretend this night never happened. Well, heck, we're almost there, guys. Only got a few minutes left, so I have been to the aircraft graveyard, and a lot of the stuff's already been chewed up. I was kind of surprised how modern some of the stuff out there was. The website I was going to tell you guys about. Hold on, history. Real quick here, I'll scroll down. Oh gosh, I watch too many YouTube videos. There's a modeler out there, the Quatermass experiment. Watch some of that today. Mind Niche has that interview with Shep Payne, master modeler. You guys, of course, we lost him some years ago. You guys may want to see that. Come on, where is it? Here it is. Escape Reality Hobbies. That's the name of the YouTube channel. And he just, his videos are about 20 minutes long, and he goes over some old kits that he's picked up and stuff like that. Just a fun channel. He's got a work area that's way too neat and clean as a backdrop. I always worry about people that have clean work areas. Here, you guys, watch your eyes. This. That's what a work area looks like. Nice and messy with all kinds of stuff. And you're only seeing half of it. There's more junk piled up over there, but I can't turn the computer that far. Anyway. Okay, watch your eyes. I'm pushing it back. Oh, okay. Just reading a commercial jet here in California. I actually saw an old Northwest Airlines 747, and what was the name of that airport? It was somewhere in North Carolina. They had like 5 old airliners parked out there. They were using as a boneyard, and the 747 was clearly a former Northwest airplane. And I asked about it. He said, they just pay $100 a month or whatever to park them there. Found money for the airport. Then years later, I saw that, but they put that 747 nose section of the Smithsonian Air and Space, and if I remember correctly, it came off that airplane that I saw. So even the boneyards, good Lord, they still get their parts there. And don't forget, Davis Moth and some of those aircraft will fly again. They're in storage technically, and some of them will get pirated for parts. But and when you see them go into the meat grinder, to get chopped up into aluminum strips, then they pretty much milk them for all they're worth. They do a good job of recycling our tax dollars on that. I'll give them that. Well, Steve, we're down to our last 2 minutes. Anything before we go?
No, I just hope that everybody enjoyed the live stream tonight and just keeps building.
Guys, I want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us. 123 people on a Friday night, not bad. I do believe next week we'll be back to our normal bat time and channel Saturday night at 7 o'clock. And, that's pretty much all I have. So, guys, take care of yourselves. Hope you're doing well. And as always, model on.